I mean, it's art, right? So photography being art, I feel like it's a means of self-expression, and I love to edit photos and make them how I felt about the scene versus what I necessarily saw.
Hello there, and welcome back to another interview here at Clever Photographer. Following the popular interview with Trey Radcliffe, I am happy to welcome another amazing guest to our YouTube channel. We're gonna be heading to Austin, Texas, where we're gonna be meeting with Skylum ambassador, photography educator, and amazing landscape and cityscape photographer, Nix. Few weeks ago, I was lucky enough to sit down with Jim and talk to him about photography, photo editing, and his photography vision. All the way at the beginning, I started by discovering that there is a connection between Jim and Trey Radcliffe. So let's head there and start with the simple question, how did your photography journey start?
It's almost a cliche at this point to say this, but your previous guest on the show, Trey, he used to live here in Austin, and I met him through work. And he mentioned, he's like, yeah, I'm a photographer. I have this blog. This was 2008. He's like, yeah, check it out. So I went and looked at it, and I'm not exaggerating. Like it was like a pick your jaw up off the ground kind of thing. The first time I saw his photographs, I was like, OMG, these are incredible. And I'm not exaggerating when I decided pretty much on that spot that I was like, I'm going to go do that. And I didn't even know what that was. He was kind enough to meet with me a couple of times and help me get started. But I had a really basic DSLR, did not have auto bracketing. And I started out doing HDR because that's what Trey did. And I loved it, and frankly, still do. But I didn't know how to do it. I had not been a photographer. I didn't know what an aperture was. I literally knew nothing. And on top of that, I was trying to take brackets, so I had to change the exposure comp manually, every single exposure. So I was taking like 7 exposures, and I'd go click, change the EC, click, change. It was super, it's kind of ridiculous by today's standards, but it's how I got started. And it was all dumb luck through a job that I had where I just met him kind of accidentally. So I'm kind of here by accident, in fairness, and it's all Trey's fault. So I'm grateful and thankful because I do love it. And it's been a fantastic journey over the last 15 years or so.
Imagine being able to talk to Trey Radcliffe at the height of the HDR photography. That must have been something. Anyway, coming back to Jim. When I was doing my research and looking at Jim's photography portfolio, most of the images were landscapes or cityscapes. However, most of the publications around the internet mention Jim as a travel photographer. So naturally, my next question to Jim was, what does he see himself and what does he think is his photography style?
Yeah, good question. So I call myself a travel photographer, but it's because those are the two things I love most, like travel and photography. And so they go together quite well. And I think of travel photography as like anything where you leave your house. So I could go downtown and it's kind of like travel photography because even though I'm in Austin and you're not, if you see a photo of Austin, that's a travel photograph to you, right? So I kind of think of it that way. So I call myself a travel photographer, but that's kind of like, it depends on how you define things. It's like people say, oh, do you do street photography? I'm like, yeah. And then they look at it and they're like, that's not really what I call street photography. And I'm like, well, that's what I call street photography. I was standing in the street or there's a street in it. There's a couple of people in it. It's street photography. I just don't walk up and put the camera in someone's face like some of those kind of classic street photos. So to answer the question, cityscapes and landscapes are kind of the things that I shoot most. I don't really do portraits. I go to some events. I take some portraits. I do some family stuff kind of for fun. But as far as like what I consider my professional work, absolutely like cityscapes. Over time, I've added in more landscapes as I've been able to kind of dedicate trips to photography. And of course, I've been on some of the Luminar tours, Iceland, Madeira, where that's what you do is you shoot landscapes. So I shoot both. I'd say my favorite is landscapes. It's probably most people's favorites. But I adore shooting in cities as well. Just there's so much. It's a rich environment, I think, larger cities especially.
Knowing Jim's photography style and looking at his incredible images, of course that my next question was, what is his photography gear?
Yeah, of course. I shoot with Sony. So I've got, I started with the A7 Mark II years ago. This was 2016, I think, when I got my first Sony. But then a couple of years ago, I got the A7 R3, and that's what I shoot with. So 42 megapixels, it's more than enough. I've been with people who have the A7 R5, and I admit I, kind of drool a little bit and get kind of excited about it. But I was like, all right, I don't really need to spend the money. I don't need the whatever else it brings, and I don't even remember because I don't follow the bodies that closely. I'm more into the glass, I guess. And I have 6 lenses, so I have those the 20, the 24, and the 35 primes. I also have the 14 1.8 prime. These are all Sony. And that one's great for landscapes, of course, but also like night sky, aurora if you're in Iceland. And then, so I have those 4 primes, and then I have 2 zooms, if you will, the 16 to 35 2.8, the GM Mark II that came out like, I don't know, 9 months ago or whenever it was, 6 months ago. So the 16-35 kind of wide angle, and then the 24 to 70 GM Mark II as well, which is a great lens. So I don't actually have anything that goes beyond 70 mil. I mean, I'm generally more of a wide angle person, which kind of also goes back to that street photography thing I was talking about, where I like to shoot kind of environmental street photography because I just like the wider view for some reason. So I don't even have anything more than 70 mil. But I did, last time I was in Iceland, I rented the 100 to 400 Sony so that I could get puffin shots. So I'll do wildlife portraits if I get an opportunity, but I rarely do. Yeah.
Coming back to the travel photography, my next question was about Jim's favorite photography location or spot.
Well, so London's my favorite place. I adore London, and that's almost, I feel like a dumb American sometimes when I say that, because I think a lot of Americans, we're geographically isolated, let's be honest, right? So a lot of people don't always travel overseas. And so when I say, I went to London, it's my favorite city, it sounds very American because they speak my language, so it's easy. But I just like it because there's so much to shoot. I love the streets. I love the architecture and the history. I have friends there. I love to just wander around, shoot, go to a pub, go shoot some more, wander some more. I mean, it's just, and there's so much. It's just a rich environment. And so, that's probably my favorite city to go shoot in. Other places that I've really enjoyed, like Prague, is insanely gorgeous. I'm sure you've been and shot it. It's just, it may be the most beautiful city ever. I think it's, I would argue that it's prettier than Paris. And everybody says how beautiful Paris is, and it is beautiful. I would say that Prague, to me, is a little bit more exotic, and it's a little bit more dramatic, and I find it more beautiful. And then just last December, as a family, we went to Budapest, Hungary, and that was impressively gorgeous. Being a family trip, I was doing the 1 prime lens, no tripod thing, so my shots are okay. I didn't really have a lot of time for it, but walking around there, just insanely beautiful. I mean, again, rivals Paris, I think, in terms of its beauty. In fact, it looked like Paris to me quite a bit. I don't know if you've been, but it is a beautiful, beautiful city. And so if you can't tell, a lot of my travels have been to Europe, travels outside the US. And I'm very much a Europhile. I love pretty much all the places in Europe I've been. In fact, I haven't been to a place in Europe that I didn't like.
Every landscape photographer I know has something that we call a bucket list. This is a list of places or photography locations we would still like to photograph. So since we were still talking about travel photography, I asked what would be Jim's 3 favorite places he would still like to visit.
Yeah, probably number 1 is, and I'm going to mispronounce it because I'm terrible at this, but Lofoten, Norway, the northern Norway, the island or archipelago, whatever it's called up there. Lofoten, Norway. I've got friends that have been, and of course, I've seen countless photos over the years of all these other photographers who I envy every time I see their images for having been there. So that's probably number 1. Number 2 is probably Isle of Skye. And I really want to go to the Dolomites. Maybe that's number 3. Faroe Islands looks pretty amazing. Haven't been there. Those are probably, again, surprise, Europe. I mean, I guess I have a thing for Europe.
Jim's love for travel photography and also his experience with travel photography is clear. So with this next question, I ask him how does he prepare and what does he do before he goes for his next photography trip?
Great question, and it's kind of a blend. I have a plan, but I try to leave room for spontaneity as the light or conditions may dictate, right? So I tend to think of photography like when I'm putting a trip together, it's like plan and then compose and then capture and then edit. It's kind of like a 4-step process, if you will. But that plan is absolutely super important. So, I do the same thing everybody does. I Google search locations. I'll look on Instagram. A thing I like to do is go on Flickr, and you can search locations by Flickr, but you can also search by interestingness. And so that will give you what Flickr, at least, or their algorithm considers an interesting photo, which might be a different take on the more classic shot of a spot. So sometimes you get some kind of creative ideas that way, but I definitely like to plan. And I'm actually working on an ebook about travel photography that we can talk about if you want, but it's the planning is absolutely critical component of it. And I mean, I think you got to get your bucket shots, but I also think it's important to especially like in London, some of my favorite photos of London I got because I took my bucket shot location kind of photo, and instead of just hopping on the tube and zipping to the next place, I walked. And I think wandering and getting lost and kind of walking places in between these like bucket list shots, you end up with unique, interesting views and photos that maybe others aren't going to get because they're jumping from spot to spot. They got a hot list, top 5, got to get to kind of thing. And I think you can do that with some walking in between, which is one of the things I just love to do. So yes, so I plan, I make a list, I organize it kind of by section of town. I organize it based on like if you use PhotoPills to look up where's the sun going to be and is this a better sunrise or sunset spot, that sort of stuff. So I do all those kind of things. And then when I get there, I try to follow it, and I usually follow it-ish, but sometimes it kind of gets wiped out for whatever reason or things change or whatever. So it's both. I plan, but I leave room for spontaneity. And for me, the thing I always tell myself is, Jim, you cannot shoot it all. You will never shoot it all. And I always have to remind myself that, especially when I'm somewhere, because I'm like, I don't even have all the shots I want of Austin, and I live here.
By now we know what is Jim's photography style, what gear he uses, and how he prepares for his photography trips. So now I moved a little bit closer to the photo editing. And I wanted to know, when Jim takes a picture, if he already has a vision on how the image is going to look, or if it develops during the photo editing.
I don't know. It's both, really. So many times, I think this will depend on what's happening with the condition. So if I get a stunning sunset at Big Ben, I know Big Ben is the bell, but anyway, everybody calls it Big Ben. So anyway, if I get a stunning sunset and I've got the Westminster Bridge and I got Big Ben, Houses of Parliament, I got the River Thames and all that, and I got my shot and I'm like, okay, I know what I'm going to do, right? If I'm in Luminar, I'm going to do all my basic stuff. I'm going to use a little golden hour in the sky. I'm going to use a little blur in the water or some negative structure. I'm going to add a little positive structure in the build, whatever. I'm going to do a little color balance to play around a little bit. But I mean, if it's a gorgeous sunset, like I don't want to, for lack of a better term, over edit that. I want to represent that close to how I saw it. Now, I'm not a photojournalist, right? I've never claimed to say that, I took this photo and here's my shared version, and those were exactly the same. Like, that's not the case. I edit my photos, and I'm happy to edit the photos, and I don't shy away from editing photos, and I'm not ashamed that I edit, all that stuff. I love to edit photos. So many times, if it's really beautiful conditions, I'm like, this is going to be an easy edit because you don't have to do, because Mother Nature or whatever did a lot of the work for you. But then again, referencing what I said earlier, maybe I learn new skills, or there's new color tools or different looks you can apply. Maybe I was actually doing this with a Tower Bridge photo that I made a video about that's coming out soon. And I it was kind of an early blue hour, and I made it a little bit darker, a little bit moodier, but I made it more of an teal and orange kind of look. And I did that with various color tools. And so I didn't think about that at the time. In fact, 6 years ago when I took it, I don't even know if I knew what the teal and orange, color kind of color look was. I don't know. I mean, I can't remember when I started doing that. But anyway, so yes, sometimes I'll just go back and I'll just say, I want to do something a little bit different. I want to be a little creative here. I want to play with this tool or that tool instead of my usual. And you come up with something different. So that was it depends. Like most of my answers probably in this discussion have been like, it depends, because it does depend,
Now moving completely to photo editing, and for those who don't know, Jim is one of the most recognized experts for Luminar Neo and Skylum software. So of course, my next question was about his connection to Skylum, Luminar Neo, and even before Aurora HDR.
It's I don't know if funny is probably not the right word. Maybe interesting to me story. I'll try to make it short. So I used to do all this HDR, and in the old days, I used Photomatics and Color Effects Pro from which part of the Nix collection, and I kept everything in Aperture. So that was kind of my workflow. And so because I was a blogger in the beginning, I didn't make tutorials or anything. I put everything on my blog, and so I had a bunch of HDR stuff on my blog. Well, I had seen that Trey had co-developed Aurora with the people at Skylum at the time called MacFun. I saw it came out and I was like, cool, that's great for Trey. I don't know if I need another HDR tool because I already had like 3 others. And so I was like, I'm not gonna buy it. Just forget it. Well, a little while later, one of their marketing people found my website and sent me an email and said, hey man, like you do a lot of HDR, but it's all Photomatics. Would you be willing to try Aurora? And I was like, okay, I'll try it. So they sent me a license, and I'm not exaggerating. The first time I opened it, it was kind of like the first time I saw one of Trey's photos. It was like a jaw dropper. I was like, OMG, like I can do everything right here. You mean I don't have to go Aperture to Photomatics, back to Aperture to Color Effects Pro, back to Aperture, maybe to Topaz. I can do it all here. It's got layer. I was literally done. I didn't open Photomatics again to edit a photo. And so I was like, this is crazy. I love it. And that was right about the same time that I started deciding I wanted to make videos and put them on YouTube. And that's, in fairness, complete laziness on my part, because I used to write all these long articles and tutorials, and then someone asked me a question. It's just easier to show the answer in a video than it is to write a long answer. But at the time, I was writing these long answers. Then 2 months would go by, I'd get the same question. I'm like, I should have kept that answer. Now I got to retype it. And so I got lazy. I was like, I'm going to make a video. So my YouTube channel, I started making videos about Aurora HDR. And then Alex, who at the time was CEO of Skylum, again, called MacFun at the time, Alex called me up and he said, hey, you've been making these tutorials about Aurora. Would you be willing to make Aurora tutorials for us to put on our website? So basically they hired me to do that. I was like, this is great. So I was super happy. I was like, wow, I'm like getting paid to make videos for somebody and they think I'm good enough that like they'll put it on their website. So I was super excited and proud. And then we did a bunch of videos, and then it was kind of quiet for a little while. And then Alex calls me one day and he said, hey, Jim, we're making another product. And it's going to be kind of like Lightroom. Would you be willing to take a look at it? I think we're going to call it Luminar. And I was like, sure. So they sent me a beta copy and I started playing with it, and same kind of thing. I was like, oh my God, I love this. I just love it. So I fell in love with the Luminar 0. Whatever. It wasn't even available yet. So I'm kind of like the first guy. Well, I don't know if I'm really the first guy, but I'm probably one of the first people to have Luminar 1, whatever it's called. I think it came out in 2017. So I had the beta, and then once they had production ready, they asked me to make videos for that first original Luminar. So that's kind of how it was. Again, just dumb luck. And it was curiosity for me because I was curious to try Aurora because they asked me, and I was like, all right, I mean, if Trey helped co-develop it, clearly he knows what he's doing. It's got to be pretty good. So maybe I'll try it. So it's kind of curiosity and then laziness/curiosity about making videos. In my early videos, I was very much like, hi, I am Jim. And, I was very uncomfortable in front of the camera. It was pretty bad. Don't go look. Now you're going to go look. But anyway, So it's just kind of curiosity that got me into that, and then just being willing to kind of say yes when weird, perhaps interesting things come your way. And so that's how I got into Luminar. It was, again, just an accident, and it just so happened because I was trying Aurora and playing around with that and making videos. So they asked me to check out Luminar 1. I did, and I haven't looked back. I mean, I love it. It's a tool that I use the most, and even though I have other tools that I use, I adore the product. Just absolutely love it. Use it all the time. So long story, sorry, but that's the shortest version.
Long story or short story, it doesn't matter. I think it was very interesting. But we're not gonna leave Luminar Neo yet, because my next question was about Jim's 3 favorite tools in this photo editing application.
I have a lot of favorite tools in Luminar. In fact, I fave my tool. You know how you right click and add it to favorites, so it goes to the top. I wish, however, I could arrange those in the order that I want them in. You can't, unfortunately. But yeah, my favorite tools, and some of these are boring, but there's a lot of great AI in products like Luminar, and including in Luminar. But I don't always use the AI stuff, because the 2 things that I edit the most and think about the most when I'm editing are light and color. And so for me, the tools that I use the most are Develop or Develop Raw. And then, so I'd say Develop Raw. I always start with that. And then Super Contrast, because again, it's about adjusting the light. And then usually after that, I'll use Develop again and again and again. I've done some photos where I've only used Develop, because it's got so much in it. Like you kind of don't need a whole lot more stuff than that. If you want to replace the sky, of course, right, you need other tools. But so I would say Develop and Super Contrast. That's the 1-2 punch for me in terms of how I start every edit. Outside of that, it's color tools like Color Harmony is one of my favorites. I love toning, also known as split toning in other apps. I love Golden Hour. I love Accent AI. I love Mystical. The new Twilight Enhancer is really cool. There's a lot. If I had top 3 in terms of what I use the most, gosh, I got to look at Luminar here. Let me see here. Yeah, Develop, Super Contrast, Accent AI, Mystical, Color Harmony. That's not 3, but it's pretty. You notice there's not a lot of AI in there. Accent AI, right? But I edit kind of traditionally, because I guess that's kind of how I learned to edit, right? Back in the day, we didn't have a lot of AI. We had to do it all kind of manually, as you know. So I'd say those are my favorite tools, but it doesn't mean I don't use a lot of the other stuff, right? Those are maybe the more essential tools and the ones that I always use and start with. But then there's others that'll drop in. Twilight Enhancer, if I replace the sky, then Sky AI, whatever it may be. So that's the beauty of Luminar, I think. There's so many great tools and a lot of great color tools. You can just do so much. It's fun.
Knowing Jim as a content creator or well-respected photography educator, I asked him to share with us his website and also tell us more about his photography products.
Yeah, sure. So my website is just my name, jimnix.com. I do have digital products. I've got a number of preset packs for Luminar Neo that are available as low as $5. And then I've got a mega pack that's $39. It's got like 50 presets in it for all different types of photos. So I've got that. I've got a sky pack, of course. I've got a couple of LUT packs. So if you use LUTs, they'll work in multiple products like On One, right? Photoshop, obviously Luminar, insert product name here. As long as they support LUTs, these LUTs will work there. A year or so ago, I launched this Luminar Neo masking masterclass. It's been really popular, so I'm super grateful for that. And I continue to add new videos to it based on new tools that come out. So it'll get another update here after this tool is out. But so I have that class. And then the other class is an HDR class. HDR Merge within Luminar Neo is my favorite extension, the one that I use the most. And I still love HDR. Whether you like it or not, cool. You don't have to like it. And we don't have to debate that. It has its place, I think. But I like it. And so that was actually the first course I built. And that was about a year and a half ago. And that was a HDR Merge class on how to use that and get the most out of HDR. And that one includes a lengthy ebook, a bunch of raw files, some videos. Both courses include the raw files, etc. So those are the 2 courses that I offer. So that and presets. And then I'm working on an ebook about travel photography. It's not done yet. I'm still working on it, but it's got tips, tricks, insights about making sure that you can capture your best photos when you're traveling. So it ties in really nicely to what we've been talking about today.
By now, it was almost time to finish. But before we did that, I asked Jim for a final thought and a tip for photographers out there to help them to keep moving on their photography journey.
Yeah, the old cliche that like it's a marathon, not a sprint. Like most people, I'm also like, oh, I want to master that today. Oh, I got an hour free. I'm going to learn everything possible, and it's that never works. And then I end up walking away frustrated because I'm not getting it because I'm trying to do everything instead of like one thing. So there's a book called Deep Work, which is really just about how you can focus and just go really deep on something by removing all these distractions. So one of the things that helped me a lot is kind of employing those techniques, which is like take a bite-sized chunk and just dive into it. And the bite-sized chunk could be one little tool in Luminar, for example, or one masking tool in Lightroom, or whatever tools you use, right? So, but just practice with it. And then even if you have, like I used to be, like, so let's say the family's getting ready to go to dinner and maybe I showered quickly and I'm ready to go and we've got 30 minutes until everybody else is ready. You can take that 30 minutes and learn something. I mean, it's easy to pick up your phone and scroll Instagram, and I do it. I'm guilty as anybody. But a lot of times I'll be like, ooh, I'm going to jump into Luminar and play with something real quick. Because you can get in 30 or even 15 minutes, maybe you can learn something. And so you don't have to have these massive 8-hour chunks of dedicated time to get better at something. You can do these kind of incremental little things. And what I think you'll find over time is these little incremental things really do add up. And then after a while, you'll be like, lift your head up and look around and you're like, hey, I've made a lot of progress. That's what I used to be like. And now I'm over here. I really moved myself ahead and I did it a little bit at a time. So the long way of saying it's a marathon, not a sprint. You don't have to get it all done right away. And those little things add up, those little bits of knowledge. If you can just focus on something for 15 minutes, you may be surprised at how much you can learn about it and how much better you may get at it. So that's something I've had to learn the hard way because, having a family and I've had jobs and all those kind of things and wanting to make content and wanting to blog and then wanting to work out and all the things that life, provides for everybody. It's hard sometimes to say, okay, I've got a 4-hour block on Saturday. I'm going to do whatever it doesn't always work like that, So just because you don't have that huge block of time doesn't mean you can't learn something and get something done. Just focus, do something small, and it does add up.